talked about the personal gift, and I'm going to move on to a new capacity, and it's a capacity of the 21st century. And if it's a capacity that I don't think is taught in colloquial schools. It's a capacity that's naturally an outbirth of what's happened in our global competitive marketplace. And it's the capacity to do what's called symphony. Symphony is the capacity to see the interdependencies of components within a whole system. When you see something with symphony, you're able to assemble things. You're able to put things together because you start to see, it's like putting together a puzzle on the table, and you start to conceptualize how it is able to be assembled together, because you start to see all of these interdependent pieces. So I remember putting the puzzles together. You'd have like a giant ship that you're putting together. You had 1,000 pieces, and you'd start to see the way one little nodule on the puzzle piece, and you find another nodule, and then you find 5 nodules, and you start to see the whole thing. You start to put it together, much like how a chess player has symphony, and they start to see 6 moves, and they start to see the interdependencies. If I move to the left, here's what might happen, and if I move to the right, and if I take that, here's what might happen. And they think like 4 or 5 consequential levels deep on things, and they start assembling things in a certain way. And it's this idea of kind of slowing down, where slow is the new fast. Because as we're rushed through this economic rush and gush of all this techno-tragic information that we're getting, what's happening here is we're tuning out of potential capacities in our mind that we need to depend on for our own sustenance. So if we're occupying ourselves with all the stuff and all of these things, we don't get into the part of ourselves. We kind of shut down a potential component, a horsepower piece in our brain that we need to trip a switch on so that we can capacitate ourselves, get into a private monopoly in our business because we become one of a kind. And it's like that right brain tapping that I talked about in the Big Mind Shift. But in order to reach symphony, in order for people to start bringing together how their personal gift can be deposited into a unique ensemble, and a unique ensemble is a whole set. It's like a Lego set. A unique ensemble is a whole set of components that molecularly can be composited, that can be fused and blended and joined so that the business essentially becomes a unique ensemble. It's much like how a group comes together and they all see different components in the song, and they're able to collectively express a song that meets all of their contributions. It's like the 5 blind men are trying to explain the elephant, and through each other they're able to see the final rendering of what it is that they're seeing and feeling and hearing and smelling. So it's this idea of putting something together, and in order for us to put something together, it involves breakthroughs. It involves that we come upon breakthroughs, which is pioneering into territory where we haven't quite demonstrated to ourselves a certain ability. We reach into a whole new frontier of capability on how something can work. And this is really tapping a creative zone, a part of your mind, and it takes something to get there. And I'm going to give you 2 particular ways to do it. In order to reach symphony, it's going to involve stillness. Stillness. Now, when I say stillness, that means that you have to slow down and get still for you to take delivery of new thoughts, new ideas, new imaginary renderings, because I know this. I know this for a fact, that when you get a breakthrough, first of all, it doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from elsewhere. The answers come from you. And how they come from you is they come from environments that kind of sponsor and nurture and support you getting those. That's why people go to retreats. That's why individuals go out into nature. That's why historically we have a way of changing where we are so that we can change how we think. So if you can find a way to move into different environments so that you can be still, you'll find yourself with new ideas creeping up on you like you never imagined before. Because I know the ideas creep up on you in the shower. You'll be in the car and suddenly an idea creeps up on you. And if you're like me, I get angry when I lose ideas because it's like they showed up and suddenly they went away. and I had to think real hard to try to find them again. It's like a lyricist who finds that final chord that clicks, and it went, and it sort of came all together in their mind, and then it just washed away like the wave came in and washed out the fingerprint or the footprint. You can't see it anymore, and you go, oh, I wish I'd had it. And we all have those moments where, in the stillness of things, or even in other environments, it doesn't have to necessarily be always still, but the idea is that you're out of this typical trench of knowledge work and demand and email and voicemail and constant messaging and having to process, where you really need time to reflect and to look at what you're doing. And I've noticed this, that when you take time away from the office, when you get out of there and you are away, you go to your ski cottage or you go to Hawaii, or every time you're away, you just start to experience new breakthroughs. And it's because your mind goes into a different gear. And if you don't honor that gear, then it's not like, and this is interesting because it's how you perceive progress. See, if you're always working, you're only using probably 10% of the horsepower of your real brain. But if you're slowing down, it really does something to you. Let me give you a couple of ideas. You'll see in sports games where one team will be losing over a series. We just saw this in one of the playoff series for baseball this year, where the Boston Red Sox are playing the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. And of course, the Devil Rays have never been to the World Series. They've got all this exuberance. They're quote-unquote a younger team. Boston has more experience. They're the world champions. They went last year in 2007. And here we see Devil Rays pulling ahead. They're up by 3 games. Boston is down. They got 1 game. It's the 7th inning of the 4th game or the 5th game. And, what's happening here is that Boston, we all think they're going to lose. And what happens is they get a day off. And what happens in between is they get this day off, right? And they kind of mentally clean up. And they get ideas, and they look at their game, and they take a step back, and it's like a short reversal. And they took a couple of steps back. They stopped activity. They got still. They relaxed. They took a pit stop, and then they made a turnaround. And then the next game, guess what? They won. They made a comeback. They made an extraordinary comeback. After the 7th inning of the next game, they turned around and actually beat the Devil Rays from 7-0. They came back and beat them 8-7. It was a miraculous victory and one of the best comebacks in sports ever. So this idea of stopping to be more productive is tremendous. And we Americans have gotten so ingrained in our fiber of our being that we have to go, and that progress equals all of that consistency of work. And we take the fewest amount of days off in comparison to any other country on the planet. So we've forgotten how to measure our success. We've confused it with a poor yardstick. And we've forgotten how to get still. And we continue to get more busy and more busy. We drive faster. We pack more into our day. We overcommit ourselves, overload our agendas. So if you can imagine a computer that has, 1 gig of RAM, and it's got, 400 gigs on the hard drive, and there's only 100 gigs of space. I mean, you can't manage it all. So we have to give our mind a break. And it's hard to do when we're so ingrained in just this rut of just work. And there's lots of fear involved, and there's panic, and there's guilt, and our identity has become work, like I talked about in the 4 different stages of the plateau. But stillness. What are you doing to get still? And stillness comes from focusing on one thing. Meditation doesn't mean sitting in a yoga position, although it's great, but some of you may not want to do that. It doesn't mean just breathing deeply. It means you kind of focus on one activity, and that's all you do. And you clear your mind, and nothing else enters the space. That's it. And if anything else enters, it's not allowed. All you do is just focus on what you're doing. So if you like gardening, that's all you do. This is like therapy, People say, I have an outlet. I have a client who does sculpting, and this allows him to get into that state of mind where he separates himself from all of his all the things going on. He gets off the freeway, so to speak, mentally, the mental freeway. And he gets off on an exit, and he goes into another place. He goes off the street. He goes into, a beautiful pasture. And I'm using this metaphorically, is you got to get off the freeway in your life and get off and actually go look at the scenery and enjoy what you've got. You got to get still. You got to take a look. because we miss so much by constantly looking ahead. And I think part of the reason why we look ahead is we've gotten very future focused in our country. In third world countries, they're very present oriented too. It's about enjoying the moment. In Mexico, you're not thinking about what's for dinner while you're eating breakfast. You're enjoying the moment. You're getting still and looking at what you're doing. But we Americans, we're just constantly passing things by to go suffer enough to get something later. And we miss so much, where we have so much available to us right now. And what we can do is we can learn how to slow down amidst the freeway. The freeway will still go. You know what it feels like when you're driving 65 and you got 80-mile-an-hour maniacs going around you? That's kind of what it's like going to feel like, is you got to slow it down. You got to work at your own speed. Take the heat. Screw it if they bump horns at you. Is it worth losing your life over? These are the things that cause heart attacks, is you start picking up on everybody else's speed. These are the things that make you have accidents, right? So think about this. What are you doing to bring stillness into your life? Real stillness. Maybe you have an outlet, music. Maybe you have a creative space that you like to create where you can get into stillness. If you have kids, that's fine. Maybe you have an hour real early in the morning where you do your stillness. You've got to get still, because if you don't get still, these breakthroughs don't come upon you. And the breakthroughs are these brand new, pioneering thoughts and ideas that come from inside. See? The second thing is fiddling. When you fiddle more with what you have. I had an attorney tell me recently that his website results from his pay-per-click advertising weren't working, and he had just put together a campaign. And he said, well, I'm thinking of pulling it because all I am is getting shoppers on the phone, and it's not the right marketing tactic. And of course, I asked him a couple of questions, and I said, look, how long have you been doing it? He said, well, we just got into it. And I said, okay, well, how about looking at it from this perspective? Why don't we fiddle around with it? Why don't we step back and try moving around different elements in the system so that we can find a way to make it work? I know you have a result you want, but why don't we start playing around with it? Why don't we test drive a while? Why don't we fiddle around with it until it works? You see, again, he's on that freeway, and he's got to have it all now, and he's got to have it now, and I got to get there now, and I'm pressing on the throttle, and I'm sitting there at the stoplight, and I think that if I press on the throttle, that light's going to turn green. You see, that's how we're operating here. See the insanity of it. So this means you fiddle more with what you have. You fiddle more with people. You fiddle more with opportunities. You fiddle more with tasks. You fiddle more with products that you have. You fiddle more with services that you deliver. You fiddle and you fiddle and you fiddle. You got to spend more time with them. And as you fiddle more and you get more stillness, you start seeing a way that they can work. You start seeing how the interdependent components can fit together. You start seeing molecular combinations. You start seeing different things. This is how the baby diaper was invented by Johnson & Johnson. The guys fiddled more with things. This is how the razor was created, the little skateboard ideas. They fiddled more with the skateboard and fiddled around with the way the market wanted it. So we fiddle. We've got to fiddle more. And what fiddling does, the neat thing about fiddling, is it allows us to come upon opportunities without a high risk. If we fiddle more with stuff, we're more experiment-centric than factory-centric, right? We're not going to build the factory, man it and everything, and then expect the market. That's the field of dreams syndrome, right? If you build it, they will come. You can't do that these days. There's just too many options in the marketplace. The consumer's way too impatient, and we're living in a global economy. So you got to jog into things. Walk before we run. Slow down. Slow is the new fast. I love the story in Colors. Remember Colors with Sean Penn and Robert Duvall? When, of course, there's a father, and there is a father bull, and there is a son that's standing on the top of a hill, and they're looking down on a whole pasture of cows. And the son looks over at the father and says, Dad, let's run down there and let's go nail that cow. And the father looks over and says, hold on, son, why don't we walk down there and we'll do them all. And that's it, is that you walk into things, slow down, and build in slow proactively. Don't slow down because your life allows you to. You really think that your work is intelligently thinking about giving you slow down, and you really think that other areas of your life are thinking about giving you slow down? That's like saying I'm going to go into my business and I'm just going to allow what's ever left over to kind of be left over without any planning or carving or sculpting. That's like putting profit last in your business. And that's like putting this last in your business, putting this last in your life, so that you'll be, run into the habit of just reacting and responding and doing what you've always done and going fast and going on the freeway, and people are going faster, so you're going to catch up and you're going to try to get there and you're moving ahead. Get off the freeway. Take a pit stop. Okay? It's better to get there instead of die getting there. Right? Think about this. I mean, this is a huge, huge trend right now in terms of people moving at things so fast that they just don't see all sides of things. They've got a myopic view. I got to get there. Well, what about what you see on the way? What about all the opportunities while you're in the situation that you're in? What about all the breakthroughs that creep up on you? There's really two kinds of time then, There's what's called chronos time, which is a concept that descended from chronos. Chronology is the concept. Chronos is the Roman god of time. It meant the sequence of events, time in the form of a sequence that orients us, so we know where we are and what we should be doing. So it's the time of the orientation. It's the time of the deadline. It's the time of what we're supposed to be doing when we thought what we planned to be doing. It's the time of limits. It's the time of I do this now and I stop and then I do that. It's the time of the plan. It's the plan time. But there's another type of time, and it's a time that you've experienced, and it's a time that you can experience more. And it's called Kairos time, Kairos. And the moments when I've had Kairos time are in the best talks that I've had with people I love. For example, I've had Kairos moments with my dad, and I'm telling you that Kairos time is the time of the seasons. It's the defining moment. It's the time of opportunity. It's the unexpected sequence of events. It's what I call the revelatory point. The revelatory point, or the revelatory point is when you find an idea or you come upon an aha that sort of buoys to the top and rises up and you unite with it. And one of the biggest tragedies is that you're so chronos time oriented that anything that buoys to the top has to stay asleep. You can't deal with it. You can't get to it. You got to hide it away. You have to wait on it. You can't come up. So it could be an opportunity. It could be a new product idea. It could be a new direction that you want to go. It could be, and I think one of the things that all of us at some level, even on a cellular level, want to experience is be able to have that sense of freedom where we can get to that Kairos time and be able to indulge in moments where we really allow openings to happen, and Kairos time, it can be extraordinarily powerful. I've had meetings with individuals where we went into the meeting, we had a structure in the meeting, but it was a convergence of structure and freedom. We were free to move about the structure, and as we would talk about the topics, each of us would internalize those topics, reflect on those topics, and it was like an iron sharpening iron session. Suddenly somebody would say something, and you go, oh my gosh, now that you've said that, I'm really able to piece something else to it. And so the vantage points in the conversation start to change, and this is what happens in a dialogue. William Isaacs, in his book, The Dialogue, The Art and Practice of Thinking Together, talks about Kairos time and how these defining moments seem to come about through people making these kinds of exchanges. And I think it's absolutely fascinating how Kairos can be disallowed and also nourished and sponsored. And I think obviously there is to live on the earth successfully. Obviously, there needs to be an appropriate combination. I mean, if we did our entire life by accident and defining moments, we would be going with the flow to such a degree that we would only be guided by what's happening to us rather than acting on behalf of something that inwardly directs us to it. So there's a combination of moving towards something, but also on the way, paying attention in the present moments of what we have and allowing ourselves the full presence and the opportunity to fully experience what it is that we have. And I found that in so many moments, sometimes what I expected to happen didn't happen, but something else happened. And that thing that happened had all the merit, and it was what was supposed to happen. And it's that idea kind of, letting the tightening of the muscle loosen up a bit and allowing something to occur. And when I was in acting class, when I was 18, 20 years old, I would go to an improvisational workshop called the Harvey Lembeck program. It's where Robin Williams came from. One of the things that makes Robin Williams amazing is that he's such a quick thinker. He's got such quick wit, and words seem to come to him in such instantaneous ways. He's a lightning responder. And a lot of the people in the workshop were trying to get to this sort of self-trust, get to this sort of space. And what they were trying to get into was Kairos time. They had all of these these untapped or areas where, as they started on a string of an angle that something funny was going on, they would start to talk about it, and as the audience was responding, suddenly boom, they get onto another thought, and then boom, they get onto another thought, and then boom, and then 20 thoughts later and 20 sentences later, they're into just a crazy topic that is just guided by the moments. And some of the best comedy I ever saw were these people that were fully engaged without even thinking about it, almost so immersed in a way that they had arrived at some brilliant stuff, but it wasn't in their act. It was just that process of allowing it to boil up and to come through and to, almost clear the way, as if you just opened this aperture up and wide open. It was, and all the inhibitions were gone. What I see a lot happening is that individuals start to inject substances into themselves. They get on alcohol, or they got to put something in their arm, or they got to take something to try to open this up. They try to reduce their inhibitions because they're not in Kairos, and this is because they're not still enough. That if they could get still enough, and maybe exercise is a way of stillness. I find that it is a source for people. That they often go to the gym, and even though there are people around, they're very much in their own world, and they have their own way of doing it, and they use it as an outlet and a way to reach onto something that's very meaningful. A certain state of being, a certain way in which they feel, a certain state that they want to experience and live in. And so this whole idea of Kairos time and getting to Symphony is just an amazing idea. Now, there's some other skin that we have to peel back. There's some other layers on the onion to get into Kairos that we might need to do, and that is that you've gotten into a rut of thinking like the specialty that you are. And you've confined yourself by thinking certain ways by the very titles in which you hold. So if you're a doctor, one of the ways you can stifle breakthrough thinking and not get to it is by calling yourself and admitting to yourself that you are a doctor and you have to meet up to certain expectations that doctors are supposed to do. So we have to outstrip that. We have to get naked. Nakedness means that we go back to the very origins of what you're really doing, that we get down to the very nuclear elements in an onion of what's the core of what you do. And the core is that you are an entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur is an individual that takes a certain set of resources from a low level to a very high level. So that's what your entrepreneurship does. And by doing that, what you're doing is you're a state changer. You're bringing a certain state, a current state, into a desired state. You have a desired state that you imagine. You look at the current state, and by virtue of action, what you do is you materialize something that you imagine. The entrepreneur is the person who takes delivery of a dream. And within that, the entrepreneur is pleasurably involved. Of course, they're doing something meaningful. It can be very altruistic because their causes are going to affect others. They can be very transparent about who they are and what they have as they're going through this process. And that is the entrepreneur. But we've got all these other cloaks that we work under. We're a mortgage broker, or we are a CPA, or we are this, we are that. And you may want to redefine that you are, first, an entrepreneur with an X specialty. You are an entrepreneur who has a specialty in medicine. You're an entrepreneur who has a specialty in coaching. You're an entrepreneur with a specialty in law. And if you start thinking of yourself that way, then we get back to the core thinking. We get back to the possibility of reaching Kairos, that we are an entrepreneur. And in that case, you don't have to be restricted by having to cloak something, having to have this membrane around you of this limiting role that you're in. That you truly are in the marketing business. And the marketing business is what you say and do to create and maintain clients. And in the marketing business, if you're a doctor, you're marketing medical solutions. You're marketing a medical practice. If you're a lawyer, you're marketing legal solutions. You're marketing a law practice. That's what you're doing. And if you're in the marketing business, of course, you're an entrepreneur, and you're an entrepreneur who is in the marketing business with a specialty in X. That's what you're doing. Now, if we're going to go to another level, where do we move from here? We've got this personal gift. I've talked about Kairos time. How do we get our head around breakthroughs? How do we break into that area? We've got to look at stillness and fiddling, and we've got to shed some old skin. So if we could look across sort of the scape here to another level. If you were looking at a pyramid of levels, what would be another level, like a mastery level in black belt, emancipation of your personal gift? And I believe that it is how you intellectually capitalize what you do. See, because as you start with this personal gift, it has to kind of go through a threshold. It has to go through like a palantium. If you remember the movie Stargate, there was a gateway that you had to go through, and on the other side, you'd go to another world. And it's very similar. You start on one side of the gateway with your personal gift, and then you go through this palantium or this lens, and as you go through it, this gateway, you get this gateway into a whole new frontier. You get a gateway into a whole new world. And it's very similar to how it works. And I'm going to talk about what the gateway is and what the whole new frontier looks like. What I'm telling you is that this whole new frontier, what the world looks like, is you would basically emancipate you being an entrepreneur to being an intellectual capitalist who actually distributes a system that offers a unique experience. And you provide a unique experience. And see, the unique experience is a lot different than having another recipe that someone else already does and doing it better. It's having an original self-expressed recipe, an ensemble of steps and processes. You have a specific way in which you do this. And a unique experience is really what you're selling. You're not selling a product or a service. You're selling an experience. IKEA is an experience. They don't sell furniture. They do, but that's really the draw. What they sell by the time you go out is they sell the cafeteria experience. They sell the way that each decoration is made. They sell the way people look. They sell the way the help is done. It's not what they sell. It's the way they sell. There are a million furniture manufacturers and distributors in retail, but it's the way that they sell it. They provide a unique experience. McDonald's. There's a ton of burger places, but they provide a unique experience. Starbucks. You can buy coffee anywhere, but the way that they deliver it is they provide a unique experience. And somebody had probably a personal gift, a superior skill that turned into a collective advantage because there were shared advantages, and there was an ensemble of advantages, very similar to how a group would form, like the Beatles. Every one of them had a unique ability or unique advantage, and now they came together, and now they had a unique experience. When they all sang in unison, they provided this unique experience that by coming together, we'd go to their shows, and we knew that they were playing music, and they were playing rock music. There were a lot of rock groups out there, but it was the way that they did it. It was the way that they sang. It was the type of music that they did and what they originated. Nobody would do it like them. Same with Elvis. There was a lot of 50s rock, but it was the way he moved. He authenticated himself. He wasn't a poser. He didn't have other people's, recipes and didn't try to mimic them and then do it the way they did it. He was original. And geniuses are not copycats. This is a key point, is they are not copycats. So you can go to a level of intellectual property where people will come to you and say, that's really genius what you do. You have a specific distribution system in the way you do it. I'd really like to know how to do that too, and maybe I could practice your distribution system. So in a sense, what you can do or what you could become is, instead of being an entrepreneur, you can become a business choreographer. And a business choreographer designs and delivers a unique experience that changes the sensory input dramatically for a target audience. See, that's what you're doing, is you are a business choreographer who in ensemble creates a symphony of parts that fit together in a certain way. It's like Andrew Lloyd Webber, who puts together the front, middle, and back of the Phantom of the Opera. And he knows the sensory input of the audience, and he's keeping it constant so that he knows how he's going to change the emotional colorations and the experience of it. And then he puts all the elements together. He takes all of those elements that they interdepend on each other. He takes the scenes, all the messages that those scenes send, and when the first part starts, it continuously flows into the middle part, and it has a back part. And so he sees this whole thing in ensemble. He has symphony. It's the way a conductor sees the entire symphony playing together and finds a way for them to play in unison. It's taking all the components that you have, and this is where the breakthroughs get really exciting, is you figure out, how can I put my personal gift through the palantium? How can I push it through the gateway so that on the other side, what comes out of me is I go into a new frontier of emancipating my entrepreneurship to an intellectual capitalist, and then intellectual capitalist that gets emancipated to a business choreographer. And this is where the real financial rewards are and the fun. So, what is the gateway? Well, the gateway is this, that think about who really pays you, the audience. So the gateway is your customer. It's not just that, but it is the relationship that you hold with your customer. And a relationship, let's break down the roots of it. It means to re-elate, When we re-elate, it means to continuously be happy, to continuously be pleased, to re-relate mutually, to re-elate both sides, a relationship. So it's a point where things are re-elating consistently. There's no terminal point. It's just re-elating. It's like a ring on a finger. We re-elate. It's circular. It's infinite. So in this relationship, you have a number of portals. If you can imagine in the gateway, there's a number of little holes and portals, like an aperture. You're looking down the barrel of a gun trying to hit your target. And on the other side is that frontier where you get the result and you emancipate yourself and you jump through and you get there. This is like an advancement channel, an advancement trench that you go through. Whoop! And in these areas, there's a couple of very significant pieces about your audience. Now, what we want to do is we want to be in a position of leadership, right? Demonstrating leadership means we're more of ourselves, we're demonstrating our personal gift, but we have to link it to a couple of things. One, we have to link it to the unique future of the audience. What do they really desire? Stepping into their shoes and living for a day. Imagine that. What are their intrinsic desires? What do they really want? The people who are pleasing, the people who are paying us for what we offer. What do they really, really want? What's really most important to them? Number two, what are the threats, the dangers? What are the obstacles? What are the 3 a.m. problems, the things that keep them up at night? What are the restricting forces that they have walking in their shoes? What are their best opportunities? What are their best opportunities right now that they could capitalize on if they could just get to them? And fourth, what's the area of superior skill they have a passion for? What's the thing that they're not getting to in life that they could be doing more, being more rewarded for internally, being more rewarded for financially, and making their life more successful and helping their relationship see the opportunity of them? So if you imagine these 4 different apertures, if you think of value creation, think of it like a value creation portal. If you're going to create value, it's always in the eye of the beholder. So we want to tend to and deeply listen to what our audience tells us, and that puts us in a position of responsibility. It puts us in a position of leadership and direction, of creativity, of confidence, of capability. It puts us in a position to demonstrate our highest ability, our highest contributions to another person. And when we do that, that's what we get paid for. We get paid for making differences. See, because that's where the opportunity comes from. You can't expect opportunity before value. We got to get the value first, then we get the opportunity. And then once we get the opportunity, guess what? We can buy some free time so that we can unhook ourselves from the traffic system on the freeway, right? We can get off the 80 mile an hour speedway and actually have some time to get some breakthroughs, right? And fiddle more. So what's the money? It buys time. But to get the money, we got to find the value. And if we're going to find the value, we have to ask the right questions. So in finding the right questions, we have to ask questions about the future of the individual that we're dealing with or the client group. We have to ask questions that demonstrate that we can be trusted to learn about their dangers and threats. And we have to learn about their opportunities. And we have to also learn about what they find really engaging to them, what they're very enthusiastic about getting at in life that they're not getting to, and how we develop a program. Our whole ensemble, our whole program is geared toward hitting direct on all 4 of those fronts. In fact, it has to be attached to it and for it to work. Otherwise, we're singing the song that we sing to the wrong audience, right? They're going to come into the theater and they're going to leave. We want our song to directly hit what our audience is looking for. That's what Beatlemania was about, right? Is we saw these group of guys that led the way on a new way of music and had a way of doing it, right? They had a unique experience that they provided, and people found it to be incredibly crucial. It was a sign of the times. It was uplifting. It was wonderful the way it was presented, and it became fanatical for people, right? And it just created a virus that spread very famously over a very short period of time. Same thing with U2, right? U2 is found that way. Very similar to business concepts. So it can travel very quickly and migrate across huge scapes of minds. You can get mind share quickly like this. And you start with a concept. It's like the matchstick that starts it all. Are these things. Value creation is geared toward a future, opportunity somebody is excited about. Now, in the conversations that you're having, you got to ask questions about what people really, really want. Are you going to be there in the future? And are they clear about it? Because if they're not future-oriented, there is no value creation. There's no portal at all. You have no gateway. So forget about the arrival of the frontier. We got to pick the right outlets. We got to pick the right individuals to invest in. You got to pick the right criteria of your clients to do this. And in terms of finding out their opportunities, we got to ask them about those. What's on their radar? And what about their strengths? And how can we help galvanize those? So if we go through this gateway, what begins to formulate is you start to get really great answers and material to start putting together your music and assembling it in a certain way where this audience starts to get tantalized by what it is that you're singing. And you don't have to be someone else doing it. You do what you love doing it. You focus your personal gift into this, but it's like a spout, it's like this old faithful that just spurts up and you have this enormous free up storage of energy that's going into an engineered ensemble of unique experiences that you're yourself doing it, and you do it in such a genius way, and you start putting it together, and you start bypassing what other people are doing in the industry. And it starts off with stillness and fiddling. You see, it starts off with stillness and fiddling. You got to go slow down in order to get fast. Because the unique ensemble doesn't come together in the most potent way until you start really looking at it, taking a step back, getting out of the romance for a minute and seeing how blind you were being so close to it, getting off the freeway and seeing how stupid you were to throttle so fast, getting off on the exit and going in and enjoying the town more. That's how it comes through, see? And now you can go through the gateway, and you begin to get into a whole new frontier, and you have ruthless adaptations and test drives of these processes, and you start to put it out there, and it just becomes just completely infectious. Think of the way, there's a very famous mime who used to work in San Francisco. He was a lifelong family friend. His name is Robert Shields. And Robert and I have known each other for my whole life, and now he lives in Sedona, Arizona, and is a terrific artist. And you can look him up on the internet, robertshields.com. And Robert was famous, still is famous, for his performance art as a mime. And he had very specific techniques as a mime, like the robot, and he had the lizard, and different human imitations that he would do. And nobody could do it quite like him. Well, he and his wife, Lorene, who's also a dear family friend, would go in the streets of San Francisco and literally volunteer themselves to perform. They'd go out in the middle of the street and start doing it. And they probably wanted to go to a great school, but they just couldn't get there. So what they did was they started just volunteering their energies, and then they started drawing crowds. And year after year, more crowds would come in. And then the next year, there'd be certain show times. And then the next year, and then the next year. And over a period of years, this original talent that they had started to turn into a whole system. And they actually went through the transformative conversation frontier. They went through this gateway. And what happened was they started to learn what their audiences want. And then they were invited to television. They had their own television show, and then they went on all these guest spots. And they got invited in because they always stayed true to what it was that made them themselves. And they found that it really worked. And then they sang it in bigger forums, and they had bigger places where they demonstrated their skill and had this great run of talent. And over the years, one thing that Robert has done is he's really worked himself into a certain space in his life, a certain dimension of performance where no one can really get how he does it. And he's gotten into a catch me if you can. He is a runaway because people see him and they go, how does he do it? I mean, this is amazing. And over a period of time, he's gone from being a mime to an entrepreneur with a mime specialty to an intellectual capitalist who started to teach others how to do it because he developed his own system. And then he started to demonstrate his system in larger audiences. And then he actually became his own school. And now what he's done is he's pretty much jettisoned everything else in his life but his performance art and his artwork. And that's all he does. And that's what he's made famous for. And everything else, it's handled by a dedicated support team who takes everything away from him that he's really not good at. And all he does is just be a genius. And he's in love with his life. He's one of the most happy people I've ever met. And he and I talk consistently. So this is an example of how you move from A to B as you go through this gateway, discover your audience, stay true to what you do, and you start to figure things out that maybe there's a way I can assemble this like a symphony capacity that will enable me to deliver the enormous amount of value for mutual benefit. And you start to develop a ruthless way of adapting it and making it work until finally, the way you sing the song, you have wow factor that hits an 11 every single time, and it becomes a consistent template for how you do it. You consistently are making it better and better. And that's what I'm talking about. So really think about adopting this lens in your business. I've talked about a lot with you here about stillness and fiddling and Kairos time and the time of the defining moment and the value creation portal, this gateway that you go through with the 4 different apertures, unique future and challenges and opportunities and strengths, and how you can become a source for people of leadership, responsibility, capability, creativity, so that you're in a position of advantage, almost like a private monopoly where no one can fire you. In fact, no commoditization can even touch you because there's no one that quite sings it just like you.